accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Hey Green Lantern fans, welcome to episode number 187 of the podcast of OA. I'm your co-host Myron Rumsey, and as always we are joined by our good friend Phil Bova. Phil, my friend, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Everything's going great. A little cold over here, but I think a lot of people are getting this cold weather across the United States.
Yeah, I would agree. It's been pretty cold. We got nailed with the snow here last week, but we're doing good now. I was supposed to get hit again, of course, but that's just winter weather in the Northeast.
Yeah, you're lucky. I wish we were getting that snow.
I would gladly send it your way. But we've got a pretty packed episode for tonight. We've got obviously the Know Your Core segment, and we've got both Green Lantern Season 2, Issue number 11, and Future State Green Lantern number 2 to talk about. Plus, I want to talk a little bit about DC's Love is a Battlefield Valentine's Day special, because there's a John Stewart story in there that I think is worth at least a brief conversation. It's a small story, so it shouldn't take too long. In Green Lantern news, there's not a whole lot going on right now. It's kind of quiet. We're recording this on February 11th, so the May solicitations have not come out yet, so we don't know if there's going to be another Green Lantern book or not at this point. Now, this episode will be released after the solicitations come out, so if there's anything there, you can obviously check with the blog of OA or any other major comic book website that'll have the solicitations. One thing that is going on is our good friend who is running the Green Lantern Book Club is scheduling another session on Skype next Wednesday, February 17th, at 8 p.m. And they're going to be talking about the first 6 issues of the Green Lantern Corps series from 2006, the story arc To Be a Lantern. So if you are interested in being a part of that conversation, shoot an email to bookclubofoa, all one word, at gmail.com, and you can get set up to be part of that conversation. And it's really kind of a neat thing. It's an offshoot of our Facebook group, and we've kind of branched out and started doing things with Skype because it broadens the audience a little bit. But it's a neat way to get together with other Green Lantern fans and talk about storylines that you might be interested in. And that happens to be the next planned segment if he gets enough people interested. So feel free to jump in.
He texted me the other day about it.
Good. So, if you're interested, please feel free to jump in. Like I said, it's fan-friendly conversation, just a chance for you to get together with other Green Lantern fans. It's kind of a virtual being in a comic shop and talking to other fans kind of thing. So I encourage it. Why don't we take a quick break and we can do the Know Your Core segment, and then we'll jump into DC Love is a Battlefield.
All right, that sounds great. All right, fellow Owens, welcome back for another Know Your Core segment. This week, we have a character by the name of Cimfet Tau. Cimfet Tau, first appearance, Tales of the Green Lantern Corps Annual number 2 from 1986. Created by Steve Englehart and Bill Willingham. He hails from Space Sector 3588. Cimfet Tau was part of a force sent to stop the Mad God, Sector 3600. All were thought killed in action, their power wings lost for good. Recently he returned along with 5 other Green Lanterns thought killed by the Mad God, and the 6 have told only the Guardians of the Universe of the secrets they learned. And there you have it, fellow Owens, another cool character from the Green Lantern Corps mythology, Cimfet Tau.
So Phil, I don't know whether you buy any of the or read any of the holiday specials, but DC has a new holiday special out. Basically, it is Love is a Battlefield. It is their Valentine's Day special. And I traditionally don't buy these because there's usually maybe one or two stories that might be of interest, and usually the price tag is pretty high. The price of entry is a little bit high. But this one did have a John Stewart story written by John Ridley, who's doing the other History of the DC Universe. And the artist, and I apologize because I'm going to slaughter the name, but it's a Mankey Nahulpan, I think. I may have completely obliterated it and started an international incident potentially, but that's the name of the artist. And it's an interesting story. When the last time we saw Fatality, there was that whole thing where she'd been turned into a Star Sapphire and she felt like she had been tricked, and she and John kind of parted ways. And this story kind of picks up a little bit on that, and John is suddenly feeling like something's wrong, and his heart feels something's wrong, and he's drawn to Zamoran. And so he goes there and he confronts the Zamorans, and they have Fatality once again trapped in a Star Sapphire crystal, and they're trying to fix her, essentially, to return her to a state of emotional bliss. And basically John is like, well, no, you're just brainwashing her again. And the last time that she broke free of your control, you'd only made her more hateful. And they're basically saying, well, John, you're the reason why she's hateful. We're just trying to fix it so she can move on.
And Fatality is such a cool character.
Yeah.
I've always liked her.
So the long and the short of it is they give you a little bit of a history between John and Fatality. And basically John says you're manipulating her. It's her choice. It's her life. And this kind of gets a little bit into that whole conversation about consent to a point. And John says, the heart wants what the heart wants, if be revenge or remorse. So they decide, well, they're going to kill John then if he's going to get in the way. And he's trying to hold him off the Zamorans, but he can't do it by himself. But he knows that he's tethered to Fatality, and he basically somehow gets her to break herself free, and she's not sure why she's there. And she and John end up taking on the Zamorans side by side. And the only way they're able to really defeat the Zamorans is by joining hands and using their combined force at once. And they do that, and that ends with the two of them holding hands. And at that point, they're looking in each other's eyes. And basically he says, she's got her free will back. Her heart will want what her heart will want, be it revenge or remorse. They kind of echo that phrase again. And then he says the choice is hers. And that's how the story ends. So it's this has got a lot of very short stories in it. This one, I think, is about 7 or 8 pages. So again, it's not, if that was the only thing you were interested in, I don't think I would spend $10 on that book just for that. But if there's other stories that are in it that might be of interest, it might be worth it. It's an interesting story. The other stories that were in here, there was a Batman and Catwoman story, of course. There's a Hawkman and Hawkwoman story. There's a Mr. Miracle and Big Barda story. There's a Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor story. An Amanda Waller and Perry White story, which is kind of interesting. A Kid Flash and Red Arrow story. A Sergeant Rock story, if you can believe it. And a Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy story.
Speaking of stories, I just read Venditti's entire 4-volume run on Hawkman.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I got into it a few issues in the beginning, and then I was like, I can't keep up with so many books, so I think I'm just going to hold this one until all the volumes come out, and Volume 4 just came out this past couple of weeks or whatnot, and I just saved it, and I was like, I'm just going to do all the way 1 through 4, and man, I had a good time with it. Guy does good characterization. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, he's a good writer. This, like I said, this John Stewart story was an interesting story. I mean, like I said, it's all about relationships. If you're a big John Stewart fan and you want to revisit that, it's certainly maybe worth picking up for you. Like I said, I would not have bought it for that one story, but I did read the story. And like I said, not bad, but not something I would spend $10 on for that. But it's out there if you haven't seen it and you're interested in it. You can certainly pick it up. Why don't we jump right into the next one, since that was so short, rather than taking a break? Okay. The next book we want to talk about is the next to the last chapter of Grant Morrison and Leon Sharp's run, The Green Lantern Season 2, number 11. So what was your overall take on this? What was your thoughts?
Oh, just it was really, really in depth. It it had me feeling like Game of Thrones for a little bit there.
Definitely got a Game of Thrones vibe.
Yeah. And then I always I follow Liam Sharp on Twitter, and he's pretty generous when he posts stuff that he works on and everything, and he always talks up Green Lantern and how it's pushed his abilities, and just the way this book is put together, it's just gorgeous. The panel work is just amazing. The interception between the lines and the bleed. It's just like the man knows how to fill the space. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Now, I did see today that he posted some pictures of artwork that printed darker than they should have been. And I don't know if they'll correct that in a collected edition or not. But that was really, this issue, he really pulled out all the stops. This was Hal Jordan returning to Athmora. And before we get into the book itself, I want to talk a little bit about Athmora. This is the planet, kind of the Dark Ages, Middle Ages type planet with sword and sorcery and all that kind of stuff that Hal went to back in issue 9 of the first season. And I had been racking my brain since then trying to figure out where Athmora came from, because while Grant Morrison will make things up, lots of times he'll pull things out of history. And I'm like, there's got to be something there. And I was digging around, and I hadn't really mentioned it on the show or in a review because it hadn't come back up again, but I knew he was going back here by the solicits. And I did find out that Athmora was referred to way back in 1962 in an old John Broome Gil Kane story in Green Lantern number 16. And it was basically a story called Earth's First Green Lantern. And it has Hal and Tom Kalmaku talking a little bit, and the subject comes up about Hal's mask and why did Abin Sur have a spaceship. And so Hal had used the ring to tell him the story. And so this recounts the story of what happened to Abin Sur and how he ended up in a spaceship. Long story short, Abin Sur's on patrol. He goes to Athmora to do an investigation because basically they haven't evolved beyond the medieval stage, even though they should be well into the dawn of the atomic era, according to the Guardian's records. And he doesn't know what held him back. And he finds out what was holding them back. There's some aliens that are feeding off of their intelligence. And he basically captures them and puts them in orbit while he tries to figure out what to do with them. And that's all you really see of Athmora. But then what happens when Abin Sur goes back to Angara, one of the aliens wasn't there. He was scouting out the next planet they were going to go to after Athmora. And he tracks Abin Sur down because he doesn't have a mask on. He figures out what planet he comes from, and he attacks the planet. Abin Sur then decides to try to trick this creature. And so he basically tells him, well, I can't use my power ring to restore everything because of flying back there would use up too much energy. And he doesn't tell the aliens about the lantern. He just talks about the power ring. So that's why he's in a spaceship, is because he's trying to trick these aliens because he's being forced to go out and help them. And he can't fly there because he's used the excuse that I would run out of energy. So that's why he's in a spaceship. And he basically beats them. And after he beats that guy, that's when he flies into Earth's radiation belt and crashes.
Very cool. Look at you doing your homework. Huh?
So that's where Athmora comes from before we dive into the issue proper. But like you, I really thought this was an interesting issue. I think they said a lot of things. That there's some things that get wrapped up, some loose ends that are wrapped up here. And then there's kind of setting the stage for the finale. And it seems like there's a lot of meta commentary that Grant Morrison is making about Hal's place in the Green Lantern Corps. And it seems that, well, the young Guardians are having a hard time with basically inheriting the other Guardians' Green Lantern Corps. So they're gonna do over things. They're gonna restructure. And Hal's sense of individualism makes him too much of a liability to them. But at the same time, it's that sense of independence and his inflappable ability to overcome all odds that makes them want to go on this final mission against the Magistry, who basically have come back to our reality and are about to wipe everybody out. So they want Hal to basically go on a mission for them and then turn his ring in.
Right.
And Hal's like, not basically he's like, I got leave time. I'm going to go ahead and leave. And then they say, you'll surrender your ring, of course. And he says, well, you gave the ring the ability to make their own decisions. And the ring says, I have leave coming too, which is kind of funny. And that comes hot on the heels of finding out that things on Athmora are not going well, and that there's a lot of war between the different tribes on Athmora, and something's amiss. But the meta commentary is interesting because is he talking about Hal's place in DC Comics plans? Is he talking about his own place in DC Comics plans, or is he talking about? I mean, you could layer on a number of things. You could put politics in this, or cancel culture, or heck, he could be talking about Twitter for all that matters. Because basically they want kind of a collective mind, if you will, and Hal doesn't fit with that. And in fact, they show an image saying there may be better candidates out there, and they show an image that shows Joel Moline and Kelly Quintella and Ty Pham, because one of the things they say is that the central power batteries are kind of all linked together amongst the Omniverse. Right. So while Ty Pham is in his own reality, they're still kind of linked through these power batteries, and they talk about a golden lantern. And there's some other commentary, and that's probably the most dense part of the book, when they're kind of going over the lore. But it ties back to back when Hal teamed up with Flash, and there was those golden giants with the toys. That was a child of the Magistry. That was just a baby, and that was a hard enough fight. What can you imagine what the fully grown ones would do?
Yeah, no
that
kidding.
Kind of thing. So they talk about that. There's a scene right before Hal goes there where Hal meets up with Trilla True, and we see what happens to the Orintho babies. They're pretty well. They're like teenagers now, and they've gone to Zudar to live with other avianary type species. I believe that he calls them avianthropes, and so he kind of leaves them there. And Hal kind of makes this melancholy assessment that nobody needs me around anymore, which is kind of framing this whole thing.
Kind of like a sad version of Hal.
A little bit, but he's like, you really want me to do this? And he tries to walk away, and the young Guardians are like, where are you going? And he's like, I gotta leave, I'm taking it. See ya, bye. Right. And so, of course, where does Hal want to go? He wants to go to Athmora. And so they go, to Athmora. And on the way out, one of the things that I noticed that Liam Sharp talked about on Twitter the other day was you see Hal when he's kind of walking away and he's talking to the Ring, and the Ring says, I hate Athmora. There's a panel there where you see Volk and some other Green Lanterns in the background, and in the foreground you see this odd-looking Green Lantern. That's the traitor, not traitor, but the slave trader, not traitor, but slave trader, that Hal supposedly killed way back in season 1. You remember that scene, that issue where Hal arrests God, and at the end of the issue he nails that little alien guy?
Oh, yeah.
And yeah. And he goes, it was self-defense. You all saw it. Well, that's the guy. He was undercover.
That's great. Leave it to them guys to throw it in there,
Yeah, they had to wrap up a little bit of a loose end there, which I thought was kind of just a neat way of doing it. They didn't come right out and tell you, but if you pay attention to it, you'll see that that's that guy. And Liam Sharp pointed it out because it isn't very obvious, because you don't even get a full look at the guy. But
right.
Off to Athmora we go, and he says, just after Hal leaves, they're like, we've pinpointed the source of the incursion, the Young Guardians say. The source of the incursion, Athmora. So Hal's going right into the thick of it.
And when he gets there, you get these cool-looking cliffs.
Yeah, just a beautiful vista. Just beautiful designs. And that's one of the things where I think Liam really pushes himself to try to do these really beautiful visuals. He did a thing he talked about the other day where he actually built a 3D model of what Athmora looks like when he mapped it out. He took the map and converted it into a 3D picture of the planet from above. And I'm like, who does this stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just...
This reminds me, Athmora reminds me of like a sci-fi kind of Dune.
Yeah, kind of Dune, Mad Maxy a little bit too, when you see what's going on the planet.
Yeah.
Because Hal's attacked, as you said, And when he gets up, his power ring is gone. The power ring wasn't acting well because there are intelligence engines that keep them locked in that medieval feudal state. So it's kind of intentional at this point. I'm not sure who decided to put that there, but that's what's going on. And basically, Hal gets attacked when he comes to. At least he's in the presence of a friend, but he has no ring. And they're on a boat in the middle of a sea of fire, which is just crazy. And you see these guys, these soldiers, riding on these spiders, walking through this sea of fire. It's just amazing.
I'm telling you, man, it's like Game of Thrones. They even got banners. They're even flying underneath a certain banner.
Yeah, and you find out that basically everybody's at war. There's like a civil war going on. This is a prophecy that's come up before, and he even talks about the golden race and the star people. So this is all prophecy that is coming true for them, and they're calling it a contest of crowns instead of a Game of Thrones.
Right, exactly.
But it's neighbor against neighbor, and some of them are getting weapons from space, which is giving them an advantage. So that's kind of where I was coming from with the whole thought of Mad Max is you've got these weapons and creatures and that kind of thing. And basically Hal doesn't have a ring, so the guy gives him a sword. And I don't know where this comes in, but he talks about the sword of the champion in jade, shattered in her war with the worm of woe. I feel like there's more to that story than what we know.
I mean, there's got to be some thread that's going back to someplace.
Yeah.
But this is a really, really cool alternative realm, you know?
Yeah. Well, and we see, once again, the technodactyls. We saw them before. So Hal's getting an idea, well, something's going on because there's some familiarity here. And, we thought the Ultra War was done. We thought when Zundernell got defeated, the whole Ultra War was done. But no, it's still happening. And Hal realizes, oh my gosh, the Nomad Empire, the Golden Giants, the Magistry, they're here. And he looks through a telescope and sees the Shark and Black Hand and Major Disaster. And there's two other characters there that he doesn't identify. But one of them is, I believe, the original version of the Tattooed Man. And the other is Dr. Polaris.
Well, that would make sense. You're talking about down there on that cliff?
Yep, down on that little edge down there. And so you see those five guys are kind of his welcoming committee.
Yeah. Black Hand looks cool.
Yeah. And you don't see a whole lot of detail because it's from afar. But obviously, Hal's got five of his big villains here. And the Magistrate and no power ring. And then it's about to get worse because we discover as we get closer, we see Feck and Sister Samandra, the characters that opened up the book, are there next to this guy who's got a very odd-looking head. And you see the big power battery behind him, and it turns out it's Hector Hammond.
A very different-looking Hector Hammond.
Yeah, and you see the little face is almost like a mask that opens up. But he has the ring on his finger. And the ring is now under his control. And the ring even says, kill Jordan, kill Jordan. Slight art hiccup here where the ring is rotated 90 degrees the wrong direction. But whatever.
You notice the ring is attached. It's got tendrils going to Fennec and the other.
Yeah. It's interesting that they're doing that. And he basically said, the ring is slave to the broken lamp and it follows my will. So come and get me if you dare. And then it ends with this whole 3-panel thing of Hector Hammond saying challenge accepted. And it ends with Hal's got that little bit of a smirk that you always see Hal have when, things are about to get really interesting.
Another great challenge for him. And he's up to the challenge. He always is.
Yeah. And I'm of two minds. You think about on one hand, is Morrison really setting the stage for Hal to be put up on the shelf for a while? Or is this going to be one of these cases where he's going to use this final conflict as an allegory as for reasons why Hal shouldn't be put on the shelf for a while? Is this meta commentary on his part that, hey, DC's got plans to not really use Hal for a while. I'm going to show why he's the person that you shouldn't be putting on a shelf. Or is he actually going to be the one to put him on that shelf? Who knows?
Yeah, no. I mean, it's hard. It's tough to say because I mean they're not. I mean, besides him showing up in in that future state, who knows where he's going to appear moving forward.
Right, right. We don't really know where he's going to be, if he's going to be anywhere. So we'll see. I think overall this was a neat issue. Like I said, there's one dense section, and again, I think when you look at this series, I know a lot of people have a hard time following it or have a hard time reading it.
Yeah.
I think it would be better as a collected edition. I do think that Morrison's books, by and large, are difficult to read on a monthly basis because they do require an intellectual investment beyond a standard book. And, there's some heady stuff going on here. I mean, like I said, there's stuff that goes all the way back to the first issues of the entire series. So, who can remember what came out 2 years ago? So, it does require that. And like I think some people are buying it for the art, and that's fine too. But I hope people get enjoyment out of it. I hope people will, once this is said and done, go back and reread it and give it another chance if they're not really along for the ride too well. And I get it if they're not, because not every book is everybody's cup of tea. And this is a book that, that was my fear when Grant Morrison was announced, is what version of Grant Morrison are we going to get? And is everybody going to be able to follow along when he goes in the trip? I was worried if I wasn't going to be able to follow along, because I still have not gotten through Multiversity.
No, you haven't made it all the way through that, huh?
No, I couldn't get through that. I didn't care for Final Crisis. I struggle sometimes with Morrison myself. I think because this is Green Lantern related, maybe I'm putting more energy into it than normal, or because I'm familiar enough with the lore and so on, I'm able to kind of overcome that hurdle myself. I don't know.
I would agree with that. I mean, you invest pretty hard into like the mythology of the series and stuff. I mean that's where it's strongest at. I mean, look what you did today with Etmora.
Well, I think sometimes that's why I struggle with some of the changes that are being done, because they don't fit with the lore, or we're warping the lore to suit a purpose and we're compromising it in some ways, at least in my opinion. Right. And I struggle with that. And in this situation, I think it helps to have the extra background, but it still is a challenge. So I don't begrudge anybody who's not enjoying it. I hope that they, in the long run, come back to it at some point and come back and see the value in it, because I think it's been tremendously creative.
I think it has too, and I think it really, really. I mean, if you look at Morrison, I mean, he's going to go forward and do whatever he's going to do. But Liam Sharp, I mean, his artwork has just progressed so much since he's first come on the scene, and just every issue is just has upped the ante of the issue before it, and mad props to him and whatever he does moving forward after this.
Very true. It's funny because when this series was announced, of course, everybody's like, "Oh, Morrison." But I think Liam Sharp has been equally, if not even greater, contribution to this series.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that, and I think he should really, really look back on this as a time that really, really it honed his skills even more so from what he's done before, and maybe he would agree with it, maybe he wouldn't, but I mean, just seeing how his art has done from one issue to the next, it's changed and it's progressed in so many different ways.
I agree. I'm not sure if I'm looking forward to the next issue or not. I have kind of I'm of two minds of the whole thing.
It's gonna be the end, man.
Yeah, in a way, I don't want it to end. In another way, I'm excited to see where this is going to end up.
Which, by the way, I also ordered the Phil Jimenez variant cover of this.
Oh yeah, I thought that was really kind of neat.
Yeah, it's cool. That's a cool book.
All right, my friend. Well, we've got another book to talk about, so let's pause for a moment, and when we come back, we'll talk about some Future State.
All right.
This is Robert Vendetti, and you're listening to the podcast of OA.
All right, my friends, thanks for coming back and sticking around with us through this episode as we talk Green Lantern comics. Now, the last time we talked about Future State Green Lantern, we were not too terribly impressed with the book. Phil, you and I have not talked about this issue off mic or by text or anything, so it's completely fresh. I'm going to start out the same way I did the last time. If you looked at the 3 stories, how would you rank them?
Okay, so story 3 would be number 1. Story 2 would be number 2. And the first, wait a minute. Yeah, so the Hal Jordan story would be number 1. The second story would be number 2. And then John Stewart one would be number 3.
My list would be identical to yours.
Yeah. I'd have to say I really, really enjoyed the Teen Lantern story. I thought it kind of gave me a synopsis on the origins, which I thought was kind of cool.
Uh-huh.
I thought it was a unique origin story, and it kind of piqued my interest in the character.
Uh-huh. So let's jump back to the John Stewart story, which is the lead story.
Okay.
What were your thoughts?
So it's a continuation of the last one. I don't know. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I don't know if it's the artwork itself kind of bothers me. I can't dig the artwork. I mean, I'm not trying to rail hard on the artist, but it's just not my cup of tea.
Yeah. I mean, art is always subjective.
Yeah.
I struggle. What was the issue for you? For me, it was the proportions, especially the faces and heads, especially on what's the character's name? The young lady in the beginning. I can't remember the name now, but she.
Oh, her, yeah, the one that's flying the ship, or
the captain essentially of the ship.
Yeah.
Her face just seems out of proportion with her body, and then I don't know. It looks awful. And in some angles, like when you go to the one page where we see Nort dead on the ground, there's a picture of her there, and I'm like, is that even the same person? If it wasn't for the color of the hair, I wouldn't recognize her. Her cheeks and her lower bottom part of her face are like huge compared to her eyes.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's just the artist, you know. It's just,
yeah.
I mean, like you said, it's subjective, you know, and not everybody has the same kind of eye that another does.
Right. I mean, we all have preferences. For me, it made it, I don't know. I didn't like the art there. It's funny because I think the artist does a great job of capturing the action sequences.
Yeah.
You know, I think that, you know, capturing the kinetic energy of the battle or the it's almost like dance moves in some ways. You know, the choreography of everything is good. But then the faces and the heads seem so big on so many of the characters that it almost takes me out of it a little bit.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with it. I don't know, and I'm not really that invested in the story. I mean, it's cool. I like this one character, this what is this red god or whatever he is.
Well, the red god is Orion, as we find out in the story.
Yeah, the one with the armor on that's got
the guy with the armor that's got the Green Lantern logo. And we find out that armor is actually the armor of a Green Lantern that we've never heard of before.
Right. Which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, it was very dark, I guess.
Yeah. But other than that, I don't really know what's going on. I mean, I guess maybe there's a purpose behind it. I don't know if there's some kind of, are any of these characters out of John Stewart's history?
No.
I wonder.
They're all new. Now, will they feature into Jeff Thorne's Green Lantern run and we'll see them early on? That's possible. But for here, I'm not invested in any of them. The only characters I would have been invested in are dead and dying. Nort and Salak. And Nort not so much because he's comedy relief. Nort Baka here just doesn't. It's too much of a stretch for me.
Nort Baka.
But yeah, I'm not invested in the characters or the story. And then when we find out that John knows who the Red God is, why didn't he just do that earlier and reveal him earlier when he could have stopped some of this bloodshed? The Imskins and the small, shrinking down technology thing, that was kind of cool, I guess. But again, I'm like, oh, why did you wait? I don't know. I just thought it was not well crafted, I guess is the best way I can phrase it.
No, it was just like an extension of the first one.
Yeah.
It didn't do much for me.
Yeah, I was waiting for it to go somewhere, and it really didn't. I was like, what was the point of this story?
I mean, John Stewart's look. I mean, I kind of dig the way he looks. I mean, I can get behind something like that, but I don't see him. Well, I guess I would see him pulling that kind of look if it was like way down the line in the future, and he was well beyond his military kind of persona. But he just seems out of touch with it, with that kind of look.
Yeah.
But it is kind of cool looking.
Yeah, I don't know. It didn't do anything for me. I wasn't invested in the story. I didn't care what happened to the characters. And at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, at least like with the other stories we've read up to this point with Guy and Jessica, at least we were exploring their character and it was interesting. This is just a big glorified fight.
Right. Same as it was the last issue.
And I'm not seeing any depth of character or anything. And so for me, it fell completely flat. And I just, that combined with Tom Rainey's artwork, whatever. it just didn't do it for me. So the Teen Lantern story was interesting because you see her confronting the Young Guardians right in the beginning, and this story almost looks like it falls in line with what we see in the solicitations for Green Lantern number 1, where John Stewart is taking Kelly Quintela and Simon Baz to Oa.
And this one was really, really interesting to me. And it surprised me because I'm not, I never read anything about the Teen Lantern. Mm-hmm. I'm not familiar with her character at all, period. Besides that I knew her name. And, I thought it was really, it just surprised me because after I read it, I was like, okay, well, I'm kind of sad. I want to know some more.
Gotcha. I struggle with the concept in general. Like, I had reservations back when Robert Venditti brought in the character of Somar Lee, because you have a child who's not, is this person really capable of making life and death decisions?
Yeah.
And in Somar Lee's case, I was like, well, the ring chose her, so I have to have some faith in that process. But this is a case where she basically pulls this gauntlet, or gets this gauntlet from a dying Green Lantern who is using it for some reason. And I haven't read the story, so I'm not trying to be critical of it, but I don't know the story behind it. But I know that John Stewart, when he encountered her in Young Justice, wanted the technology back, and she didn't want to give it to him. And so he was like, well, we'll get you trained. To me, that's so out of character for John Stewart, because the only time we've seen a gauntlet like this, and this is a different gauntlet, and I understand that, but the only time we've seen a gauntlet like this was when it was Krona's gauntlet, and we saw how dangerous that was. So why would you how irresponsible is it to allow that to be on a kid?
Well, it is, and you're right, because this is part of Krona's gauntlet, isn't it? Because didn't they call it that in here?
Well, they say it's like Krona's gauntlet,
but
it's not, because you remember Hal had Krona's gauntlet, and it was kind of beat to pieces and put back in the crypts. This gauntlet is similar to it, but we don't know exactly, and so part of this is they're trying to have Kelly meet up with Joe Mullane and do some detective work to find out where did this gauntlet come from. But I have struggled with the whole idea of that the John Stewart I know wouldn't allow this to happen to begin with. And the Guardians were trying to take it off of her hand while she slept. Why? The Guardians would not let her keep the darn thing in the first place.
I know. And the exchanges between her and the Guardians are kind of comical, though.
Yeah, oh yeah. I like her youthful energy. Don't get me wrong. That part was entertaining.
Yeah.
But just the basic premise of the whole thing,
right,
is, I'm going to say it, I think it's stupid.
Okay. That's fair.
But anyway, so Kelly is being escorted out into deep space with Mogo. And that's when the central power battery goes bad. And so they're stranded. Now Mogo doesn't have a method of propulsion. Mogo's disconnected, so Mogo's losing Mogo's ability to communicate and do anything. And Kelly is left by herself. And of course, kid left stranded alone on a planet that's getting colder and colder and colder because there's no sun to keep her warm. Where's she going to get food from? All of those concerns that any of us would have. And then alien monsters show up.
Real nasty alien monsters.
Yeah, I like the artwork in this issue, this particular story. I thought the artwork was really, really good.
Oh, man, Andy Tong did a great job.
Yeah, absolutely. And those aliens are horrifying. And, she's...
The shading and the color on it is just really good.
Oh, yeah.
That one where it says Days in the Void 12, and she's standing there, and she's just the green, and then it's got the backdrop is all black. That's a great shot.
Yeah. I can't praise the artwork enough. I thought the artwork was really, really good. And she thinks she's being rescued. And nope. It's like, nope, surprise. You're Ripley on the planet full of aliens right now. And she tries to escape, but she doesn't know exactly what to do. And she reacts like a kid would be. And this, to me, underscores why this isn't a good idea. Because she's by herself. Now, she figures out how to get out of it. She kind of merges the power source with Mogo, and together they defeat the creatures. But they're still left stranded. They've only got whatever power is left in the Gauntlet's battery to keep them going. And that's how it leaves it. So it takes a very dark turn.
Which I wonder if this is where John Stewart's going to come into play with her.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it was a bad story. I wrestle with the premise to begin with that it's based on. But if I put that aside and just try to read the story, it was enjoyable.
It was. I like seeing Mogo.
Yeah, anytime you see Mogo is always a good thing. So then we get to the last story. Now, what's interesting about the Robert Venditti story is that when this book was solicited, it was not Robert Venditti. It was Christopher Priest. And it was Christopher Priest and the same artist, Dexter Soy. And this story was going to be Hal meeting up with Ollie in the wake of the power battery going dark and figuring out what he's going to do with his life without a ring.
Oh, didn't know that.
Yeah, so I don't know what happened. I don't know whether, there's been really no details out there. Robert has not said much about how he got that assignment, just that he wrote this story. So I don't know whether, there's obviously a couple things. Either Christopher Priest couldn't get the story in time, or did DC decide, no, we need to do something different with Hal and kind of set the stage because maybe we're going to use him after all in this story. Who knows? Because we do know that Jeff Thorne has said that his original plan for the Green Lantern series was a John solo story with other alien members of the Corps, and that DC editorial made him add Simon Baz and Joe Mullane and Kelly Quintella. So are there other things that DC's making him do with the Green Lantern franchise in the context of his story? I don't know. But Hal is on Earth. He's in Coast City. Basically, one of the things I like about the story is it provides one thing that none of the other stories does, and it provides some context. We kind of know how this fits in. We know this dovetails a little bit with events in other parts of the DC universe going through Future State. We hear about something that happened with Cyborg. There's this sense of connective tissue that we don't really get anywhere else. The odd thing to me is that this story, to me, might have been better as the first story in the first issue because it talks about the people that are worshiping the Red God. And it talks about losing contact with the other members of the Corps. So to me, this would have been a great frame.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. They could have done better by opening with this.
Yeah. It just odd. It was an odd decision to me. But I love Dexter Soy's artwork in this. I really thought he did a great job. Mm-hmm. I didn't like the coloring. If you look at the page where it says Recon, the title page of that, where you see Hal in the cockpit of the ship.
Yeah. Dexter
Soy posted the line work. And you see under Hal's arms where there's just these squiggles, like somebody just scribbled color in.
Over there on his right arm.
Yeah, look under his right arm. There's actually really detailed line work under there, but somebody took like a thick digital pen and just drew coloring in. I'm like, what the heck? was and Alex Sinclair is a great colorist. Don't get me wrong. Was he rushed? I don't know. It's weird. In the coloring in this, it's hard. I find it odd to say this, but sometimes you can have too much green.
Yeah, I think a lot has to do with the shading on this.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I didn't like how on that page it looked like it was just scribbled over Dexter Soy's detail work, and it looks sloppy in that particular piece. But there are other spots where the shading and the coloring look odd, like that next frame where Hal says, "Ring, let's light this candle." His mask looks odd. But, this is a case of Hal's ring isn't powered enough for him to go off and be Green Lantern, but Cyborg, and I haven't been following what goes on with Cyborg, but something apparently happened with him before he's had some kind of accident. But he's designed a ship that Hal's used, and it's amplifying the power in Hal's ring and allowing Hal perhaps a one-way ticket. And so Hal's once again going off in search of a missing Green Lantern Corps, which sounds vaguely familiar to me. I don't know about you.
It does.
But, of all of them, Hal's the one guy that would strap himself into a rocket on a one-way trip to go find people that need help and do some reconnaissance.
And then, of course, they run into some members of the Sinestro Corps. Arquillo. There's Arquillo there.
Yep. It's almost like a little travelogue.
It kind of is. We get to see Larfleeze.
Yep. We see the Red Lanterns.
Been a while since we've seen that guy.
Yep, we see the Kundians. And it says a cult worshipping the mysterious god in red. So it really ties it together. But we're reading this after those stories have already come and gone, which is odd. An odd choice from my perspective.
Agreed.
And we see Warworld. So it's kind of neat in that regard. We see Manhunters, which is interesting. But he talks about how, everything that they've tried to accomplish, it's all coming apart. And he ends up going to Oa, and he crashes on Oa, which I thought was really almost symbolic in a way that, he gets his ring from an alien crashing on Earth in a spaceship, and here he is, essentially an alien on another world, crashing his ship to their surface. But I thought it was just kind of a neat, almost a bookend of neat little symmetry.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
And one little art goof up, he gets out of the ship and he puts the ring on his ring finger. But whatever. To me, stuff like that and the white boots, those are my two biggest pet peeves. And it's like having Superman and forgetting to put the S on his shirt. It just, the ring goes on the middle finger. Come on the right hand. But the issue ends with an interesting tease where Joe Mullane is there and she kind of grabs Hal by the collar and says, "Where were you when the Corps needed you?" And then it says, "To be continued in Green Lantern 2021.
So this would eventually lead into, I guess we'll end up finding out what happened to the Corps then at some point.
I'm assuming at some point. It's interesting that this plot line is going to continue. I'm assuming. I mean, was that a to be continued for the series saying, okay, the Green Lanterns are going to continue in this book, or was it that this plot line is going to continue? To me, it was a little nebulous.
Well, when does Future State end?
This is it.
This is the last Future State?
For a Green Lantern, yeah.
So I would assume this will pick up after Morrison's next month then, right?
Yep, we'll have the Morrison book next month. That's the only Green Lantern book, and then Green Lantern #1 kicks off in April.
And here we go.
Yeah. I was like, oh, the gall of this woman grabbing him by the throat, by the neck, I wanted one more panel where he clocks her. But it's interesting. I almost feel like, and this is merely conjecture on my part, that DC wanted something changed to kind of add this element. So they kind of ditched Priest's story, like, who can we get in a pinch? And they went to Robert Venditti and they said, okay, we need this to happen. And so that's why there's not so much of a story here per se. It's almost like we're touching base on all the touch points that fans are going to want to know. And it's also an ad. But at the same time, he really does get Hal's voice and his motivations for why he's doing this right.
I liked when Venditti wrote for Green Lantern.
Yeah, he had challenges in the New 52 part of the run, but in the second half of his run when he did Hal in the Green Lantern Corps, I thought he was given much more of a free rein to do what he wanted to do. But overall, this issue, the backups were better. When you got to rely on the backups to save the main story, that's a bit of a concern.
Yeah, I didn't much. I mean, well, like I said, I'll go back to what I said originally. I didn't much care for the John Stewart one. I just don't know. I'm not sure what the purpose is supposed to be for that, but I'm assuming that'll be hashed out come a couple months or whatnot.
I guess. By then, will anybody remember or care? To be honest.
Okay, fair enough, right?
But I don't know. To me, I was already opposed to this writer in the first place, just based because of the way he's acted. But the writing in this issue and the last issue, putting that aside, every review I've read, that's the weakest link. Nobody had anything really good to say about that story that I could tell. And I didn't go out and read every review that's out there, but I checked a fair number of comic book review websites after I did my review, and comments from Reddit and a couple other places. And by and large, it's just like, this is it. This is the kind of guy we're going to get writing this, because it's nothing. But we'll see.
And only time will tell. What kind of book we're in for with this guy.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, sales will speak.
Mm-hmm. That's why I'm not buying it.
Yeah, exactly. So.
But that's just me. I people got to do what they want to do. I have always felt that the only thing DC understands is the money. So while the completionist in me is screaming in the back of my head, I'm like, I'll be able to get them later, and I'll get them cheaper. So that's okay.
That's true, and I'm fine with that too.
Yeah, I'll have ways of getting access to the book to do reviews, but I'm not going to spend my own money on it.
I agree. Fair,
all right,
fair.
All right, my friend. Let's take a quick pause, and we'll come back and we'll wrap things up.
Okay.
To tell you the story of Green Lantern is to tell you the story of the birth of a universe, the origins of DC as a whole.
It's a magic emerald meteor from space in the 1940s.
It's the establishment of the JSA.
It's the birth of the Silver Age.
It's the introduction of a universal police force.
It's the formation of the JLA.
It's the emergence of the multiverse.
It's a crisis in both space and time.
It's an emerald dawn.
And it's an emerald twilight.
It's the brightest day.
And the blackest night.
And the Lantern cast covers all of this and everything in between. We're Green Lantern's greatest advocates and fiercest critics. We've been fans for years, and it's the reason we're self-proclaimed Lanternologists.
So find us on iTunes and Stitcher and give us a listen, because the history of Green Lantern really is the history of the DC Universe. And we've got the interviews, commentaries, reviews, and more to back it up.
All right, Myron. Well, we've seen the end of Future State, and we're creeping up on the end of the Green Lantern. Morrison's run. Everything's coming to a head, man. Looks like it's big changes on the horizon.
Potentially, yeah. It's going to be an interesting ride for the next couple of months. I'm waiting to see what the solicitations bring forth, if there's going to be a second Green Lantern book of sorts, so that some of the other 25 Earth Lanterns have a place to show on the page.
Right.
But we'll be back in a couple of weeks. We've got basically to continue our reviews and conversation on the Jeff Johns run. We'll be talking about issue 9, possibly 9 and 10. It depends. I haven't really looked at them to refresh my memory. All right, my friends. Thank you, as always, for taking the time out to listen to our show and listen to Phil and I talk about Green Lantern. I hope you get some value out of it. And until next time, when we are back once again, Please take care of yourselves, take care of each other, keep that power ring charged, and make every day your brightest day.
The Podcast of Oa is the official podcast of the blog of Oa and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of Oa and the Podcast of Oa on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of Oa and the Podcast of Oa are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.